Marhaba. Welcome again to another episode of Culture Capsule. This is your host, Samar, greeting you from Abu Dhabi, the capital of the UAE. Today's conversation is about negotiator. And today, I'm grateful to have one of the best gurus in the trade, Keld Jensen. What I value in Jensen's work is his practical recognition that negotiation goes beyond tools and outcomes. Actually, he thinks that it is about a mindset that leads to trust, successful relationship. Who is Keld Jensen? Keld Jensen is an author of 27 books, founder of SMARTnership, a respectful university professor, and a practitioner trusted by many governments and organizations, and one of the most awarded negotiators all over the world. Welcome, Keld Jensen, to Culture Capsule.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So, since you wrote your first book in 1998, you went on writing 26 more books published in 38 countries. That is an outstanding commitment. So can you please share with me, how did you manage to keep on the creativity, the focus, the hard work, the learnings, the research? Let me put it in your own terminology. How did you negotiate yourself in this kind of discipline?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know it sounds a bit corny, but I actually wake up every morning without a job. I wake up with a mission because I truly believe that we need to negotiate better in the world. I think every day, especially these days as well, shows us that we're actually not very good at it. You know, every conflict comes from a bad negotiation. Every conflict ends with a negotiation. And it seems to me, both in the commercial world and in geopolitics, that we lack negotiation skills. What is interesting to me, having done a lot of research, and I'm very focused on research, I'm a bit nerdy that way, because I think that we have to separate opinions and facts. And there's a lot of opinions about negotiation, and sometimes we lack facts. So I'm knee deep into research. And one of the things that I learned is that we haven't really changed the way we negotiate since 1700. So that means we're basically sitting negotiating the same way as we did back then. So sorry for the long answer. So the reason I'm motivated to keep doing it is because I think there's room for improvement. I think we can do so much better. And there's so many angles into negotiations. So that's probably why I can keep doing it.
Keld, have you been working on two projects in the same time? Like, have you ever worked? I mean, let's do the math. 27 books. It's 2026. So have you ever worked on two books in the same time?
Yes, I have. Now the funny thing is that almost every time after I finish a project, I'm thinking, that's it. You know, there can't really be any more to write about. I was seriously thinking that after I did the last one, The Element of Negotiation, that came out 2 years ago. But then AI popped up, and AI to negotiation is basically what electricity is to humankind. It will create a real revolution, and not only in the world, but certainly in negotiation as well. So that obviously urged me to do another book. I'm talking about AI in negotiation that was just released a couple of months ago.
So writing books about negotiation is definitely different than writing a novel. So how can you keep the inspiration and the information going with the fast development on that's happening on the trade? Is it what is your secret?
I don't know if there's a secret. It was both my publisher and I were very concerned publishing the book on the use of AI in negotiation, because especially the field of AI is going so fast. So we were nervous, you know, from the time that you hand in the script, you're done writing the book yourself until the book is out on the shelf. It's about 6 months. And 6 months in the world of AI is going really fast. But we managed. It's not outdated. It's still usable. So I think it's a little bit about trying to predict what's going to happen. And in all fairness, technology moves fast, but people don't move as fast as that. I mean, changing behaviors changing the way we do things, that's a change of that kind is not happening overnight. That takes a long time.
Well, keep that thought, because I'm going to share that book that I've been reading and finished gratefully. This is Dr. Keld Jensen, the Smart Negotiator book. And I have to ask a very important question here. This book has been written for different generations. Like, I'm Generation X, I was able to read that book. If it's younger, if a millennial will read it, he will understand it. I didn't find it so hard, like taking a course of an AI, but it's easy, and I was able to understand, and I got my takeaways from. The question is, since AI is moving very, very, very fast, would you consider writing a part 2 for this book?
Yes, I would, because again, as you said, and you so correctly put it, it's changing a lot, and it's dramatic. Just to give you an example, something that we couldn't do 1 year ago. One of the things we're focused on is generating value in negotiation. Because why do we do commercial negotiations? We do commercial negotiations to create and distribute value. Full stop. That's really the only reason two private organizations or governmental institutions are doing negotiations, right? So AI is a substantial support in doing that. So very quick example. Just a couple of days ago, we were sitting with a 35 pages commercial contract. We had to dive into the contract to look for variables, everything that is negotiable that could create value. Now, when I'm doing that with a client, typically that will take 1, 2, 3 days. We ran that with the right prompt engineering through AI, and it took exactly 11 minutes. In 11 minutes, it had generated, I think, 22 pages with variables, asymmetric values, point to address, areas you should focus on, agenda, priorities, what have you. List goes on and on and on. So it actually still, every day, even though I'm knee deep into AI, it still surprises me every day, the benefits that we're getting out of AI if you use it correctly.
Okay, I would like to say something in your own words. While negotiators can turn to use AI, AI cannot replace negotiators. What will always remain, Dr. Keld Jensen, important and human and irreplaceable?
I think one thing we also have to remember is that all business is human. And what do I mean by that quote? It's always people doing business with people, right? You know, I laugh when I read Washington Post or New York Times or Financial Times or what have you, and it says that company A did a deal with company B. That's rubbish. That never happened. Two organizations never did a deal. Two governments never did a deal. What happened was it was Mr. Jones that did a deal with Mrs. Anderson. That was what happened exactly. And if Mr. Jones and Mrs. Anderson couldn't make it work, the whole deal will collapse. So we have to remember, and I hope it will stay that way because that's a good thing, that it is people doing business with people. AI, I don't hope is going to change that, but AI is going to help us improve that. So we just get a tool that can actually just improve and help us become even better at finding those values.
Let's go back to your books again. Which one is your pride and joy, and which one that you really would, let's put it this way, would rethink or, you know, approach differently now in 2026?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I'm very self-critic. So every time I finish the book, I'm often thinking that could have been done so much better. It could have been done differently. I should have changed that chapter into something else. I think I often do it. So my favorite tend to be the last one. So I would probably have to say right now it's the Smart Negotiator. Actually, I have to share a kind of embarrassing story. I reread my first book from 1998 a couple of years ago. And in 2024, when I reread it, I found it to be horrible. I was thinking, this is embarrassing that I even wrote something like that in 1998. But I hope, and I realized that the book was relevant in 1998, but time have obviously gone by. And what was something we could use in 1998 is not something that is applicable in 2024. So it also reminded me that the world is changing, obviously. Not only technology, but behavior and culture and understanding and what have you. So we probably can't read a book today from that is just 10, 15 years old on a topic, because it just suddenly becomes outdated.
Okay. There are many different types of and paradigms of negotiations: hosted negotiation, commercial, military, industrial, and much more. What I've mentioned for our region, for the GCC, do we need talent first, or talent and skill, or a bit of both? Arabs know that they love to negotiate. So how would it be working or cooking in that department for expats coming to the GCC to negotiate? Do they have trainers who are from an Arabic origin, or do you learn it? Does it take more time? What do you think?
I think you had a couple of questions in there.
Correct.
And let me start with the first one. You said Arabs love to negotiate. That's however, having said that, I was actually just on a tour visiting Qatar and Dubai and Riyadh. And the message I got from everybody I met was, we have to improve our capability in negotiations. There was a general belief, and it's not based on research, it was just based on my personal meetings with a lot of high-ranking officers from different organizations, that they feel they've been too concessional for years. And concessional is not a good thing in negotiation, because that means you're giving something away without getting something back. So I think there's a realization that they can improve their negotiation skills in general. Now, I want to add another question, or answer to your question. That is, there's a big difference between negotiation and hassle, how we actually conduct negotiations. And negotiation skills is a skill. It requires an education. It's not something we automatically do. If I should take a step back, I came into the world of negotiation because I was unconsciously incompetent in negotiating, in negotiations. I didn't know what I didn't know. I was in the tech industry back then. I was the CEO of a public company, and I thought I was a great negotiator. And then I brought in an advisor that I teamed up with later on, that in less than 120 minutes moved me from being unconsciously incompetent to consciously incompetent. And that's horrible. That's a wake-up call, because you just suddenly realized you are not really good at something that you thought you were good at. So that made me realize I was probably not the only one that was not very good at something you thought you were good at. And back to the Middle East, I think that there's a love of negotiation, which is a good thing, but there might be a lack of knowledge on how to do it properly. And what is also interesting when you look at the region, there's actually not been that much education, training, and development of competence in negotiation, if you, for instance, compare it to here in the US. So there's a huge difference in how that education is looking, and what kind of capability the negotiators actually been given.
As you've mentioned, there is haggling, and there's also Arabs like to have a good deal. So take two for the price of one, or buy something, and then as you're about to pay, you decide that you're going to buy another one. So now what price you're going to give me? Expats need to understand exactly this section, which is, there is a big difference between negotiation and the joy of haggling in the Arab world. Okay, Keld, what need to change to see more women at the negotiation table?
That's one of my favorite topics. And the reason I'm mentioning that is that research has shown that when we compare the genders, women, I'm generalizing obviously, but women have a tendency to be better negotiators than men. Now, I have to expand on that, because women often shows to be better negotiators than men when they're negotiating in somebody else's interests. So if they're negotiating on behalf of an organization, they typically outperform men. However, and here's an important however, when women are negotiating in their own interest, they are often underperforming compared to men. So just to summarize what I just said, women are better at negotiation when they're negotiating on behalf of somebody else, and worse than men when negotiating in their own interest. It's very important, and let me just stress that we get a lot more women at the negotiation table. And the reason for that is that women are, as I just said, negotiating differently than men. And there's a long list of reasons, but one of them is their empathy level, and again, I'm generalizing, is typically higher than men. And to be a really skilled, educated negotiator, you need to understand your counterpart. And you need to really understand your counterpart. And one thing that I'm basically laughing, crying about all the time is when you look at these international summits, for instance, peace discussion between Ukraine and Russia or whatever you have, you see bunch of men on one side of the table and a bunch of men on the other side of the table. And it's like sitting there, looking for the famous find Wally in the cartoon. You cannot eye a woman anywhere at those tables. And I promise you, if we had 50% of the group of people at the table being women, we would see a different outcome in those negotiations. That's a promise.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to the elements of negotiation, this book. 103 elements. I'm not going to ask you why they are 103 because it stops where it stops. I'm going to share with you how did I read this book. So this book I treated like my Stoic books. It was on my bedside table, and every day I read an element. So I finished that book in 103 days, just to let you know. And it was fun. It was really nice. I loved it. And every day, one element, I read it, I absorb it, I try to apply it. So my question would be on element number 5, humor. So, of course, you know that humor is different in different cultures, and you already explained that in your book. It's very difficult, of course, to understand the region sense of humor. It's even here, one Arab country is different than the other in the humor. So it is tough for negotiators to have humor in their negotiation with the Arabs. Can humor be replaced by another element like kindness, a little bit of levity? Because that can be hard. People live for ages in Arab countries and still they don't get the humor 100%. So what do you think about expat counterparts negotiating in Arabs and trying to bring humor in at their negotiation table?
That's a great question and very important. Now, humor is a great tool, but also a dangerous one. Because if you use it the wrong way, you can obviously offend your counterpart in a way that you don't even understand. So using humor is something I recommend, but it's also something that I warn against because you have to be careful when and how you use it. Back to your question, what can we replace? Storytelling. Because what we really want is create a connection between people. Whether we use humor or storytelling or empathy or having dinner or whatever you're doing, that's not the important part. The important part is really that we generate that connection. So an immediately tool to replace humor, if we're uncomfortable using humor, is storytelling. Share something about yourself. Share a story. Invite your counterpart a bit into your life. Back to what I said a few minutes ago, all business is human. It's people doing business with people. So we want to relate to each other. So tell stories. And I meet people that tells me I'm very uncomfortable sharing something about myself. I'm an introvert. I don't really want a small talk. I just want to get down to business. But we have to understand the best deal happens between two people that actually like each other and trust each other. We study this, and I'm sorry getting a bit nerdy again, but we studied this specifically. I did my doctorate partly on the use of trust in negotiation. And My aim was to try and capitalize trust, put a value on it, because often people are saying trust is a nice thing to have. That's untrue. Trust is a need thing to have because it's a monetary value. And this is important, Samar, because we actually found that in negotiation where trust is high, they capitalize 34% more value. I repeat that, 34% more value than in negotiation where trust is low. So we can read trust on the bottom line. It's that simple.
Wow. Okay, same book, element number 67, emotional intelligence, my favorite. Mm-hmm. Now, UAE is going through a tough time. And in time of uncertainty, people get pressured, stressed. How can the negotiator understand this time and what they should be avoiding during their negotiation?
That's another excellent question. I would say that your emotional state obviously have a huge impact on how you behave at the negotiation table. If you are stressed, if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you are being threatened by circumstances or your counterpart, that obviously giving you a different appearance and a different behavior than if you are in a relaxed, balanced state of mind. So I think part of the preparation is obviously understanding where you yourself are in your emotional intelligence. Do you understand yourself? Do you understand your own emotions? And unfortunately, I meet negotiators who don't understand their emotions. So if they're getting pressured, they might react, you know, the term pressure creates counter pressure. So if they're getting pressured, they might react with counter pressure. They become aggressive, they become combative, which is not a great way of handling it. So a great negotiator obviously not only understand the counterpart, but understand themselves as well. So, and that is not easy. I mean, it's definitely not easy, and even understanding yourself, because we may not know how we react in certain situations, and people obviously react very differently. And one of the big enemies of a great negotiator is stress. And stress is happening, obviously, to all of us all the time. We're getting stressed by what happens in the world. We get stressed by counterpart. We get stressed by our spouse at home, our manager, what have you. And we need to understand what happens when we get stressed. And what typically happens, if I make it black and white, is the runaway or combative mode, right? So it's either fight or flight, as we call it in psychology. So either we become concessional and give away, or we start being aggressive. And in negotiation, typically that means we start to use a lot of argumentation. And neither of them are great solutions. So it's I'm very happy that you actually highlight this specific element, because it's so important that we understand our own behavior, especially our reaction to certain emotional triggers.
Thank you, Keld. That was a great analysis. Thank you so much. I know that you're not a fan of virtual negotiation. But unfortunately now we're in our environment that it has to happen. So what would be your concern? Now I'm just announcing these are two questions. What would be your concern in an environment where you must do negotiation online? And how can we still succeed in negotiation online now that we have to do some?
Yes. Well, first and foremost, it's true I'm not a big fan of virtual negotiations. But having said that, they can easily be as efficient as face-to-face when and if we have met the counterpart face-to-face. I was actually just in Houston 2 days ago with a client, and we basically boarded a plane and was traveling for 4 hours just to sit in the meeting with a counterpart for 1.5 hours, shaking hands and being in the same room. And then we flew back. A lot of organizations refuse to do that today because they're thinking the cost and the time, and we can just save everything by going online. True, but you are missing that very important component called personal relationship. Because on a virtual call, you don't get that relationship when you just sit in the same room, you have a cup of coffee together, you chit-chat. And I don't know if you noticed that, Samar, but the level of small talk increases a lot more when we meet face-to-face compared to a virtual gathering. And back to what we just talked about, all business is people. It's people doing business with people. So we want to create that relationship. We want to create trust. And that is just done so much better when we shake hands and look each other in the eyes and sit in the same room. So that's why I often encourage my client to make that investment, both in time and money, and go and see somebody. Now, after that first step, we can easily conduct a lot of negotiation virtually. I even encourage that. I mean, there's no need to fly back and forth every time we need to meet up. But I would encourage and emphasize the importance of, in the beginning, sit down, meet people personally, face to face.
Thank you. Keld, true or false? Keld Jensen performs best when he's not prepared.
No, that's false.
So you have to be prepared.
Yes, I have to be very prepared. Yes.
Okay. So in a country like UAE, what would be your rule number one for preparation? Coming here to the UAE, and I mean UAE, you've been to the UAE, you've been to many countries in the region, of course, but for the UAE, what would be the first thing that you should be always aware of? And what would be the thing that you would say, I'm okay with that. I don't need to be alarmed. I will not offend anybody on the at the negotiation table if I bring this up.
You're right. Now, first and foremost, I'm not a cultural expert. There are people out there who are really expert in that field, and I often use those experts when I talk culture. Now, before I go somewhere, I try and understand the individual, because we have to be careful with cultures in a region. People often think I'm going from the US to Korea, so now I have to study Korean culture. Well, Korean culture is many things, isn't it? Just like culture in the UAE or the US are many things. There's cultures down to genders. There's culture in corporations. There are definitely, without knowing it, you know a lot more about that than I do, but there might be a different culture in Abu Dhabi than Dubai. So I really have to understand, who is it I'm meeting? What company am I meeting? What genders am I meeting? What educational background am I meeting? And one of the things, just back to AI, that I'm using already is that, and this is a bit scary, but AI can actually analyze your LinkedIn profile, and it doesn't need a big degree in prompt engineering to know how to do that. But you could basically just ask AI to go to your LinkedIn profile, and with the right prompting, ask it to analyze your LinkedIn profile. If there's some content on your LinkedIn profile, obviously, if you keep it updated and there's some stories in it. And then you can ask AI to identify you on a DISC profiling, the personal trait behavior analysis, whether you are dominant, influential, steadiness, or whatever kind of characters that show who you are. And on top of that, with the right prompting, I can also ask, based on the LinkedIn profile, please identify how Samar typically will be negotiating. Will she be combative, compromising, concessional, collaborative, stalling, and all of that. And the amazing part here, Samar, back to AI, is that in 35 seconds, I'm getting a profile of you that we've been testing over and over again, and it's actually 95% accurate. Again, as I have to emphasize, if there's some content on your LinkedIn, if you don't use your LinkedIn profile and there's basic no updates, obviously I can't do it. But if you, as a lot of people, are updating your LinkedIn profile and there's data in it, it's actually able to do that. So anyway, long answer to your questions about, but what I'm basically focusing on is a lot more on the individual than the country. I need to know the educational background, the gender, the experiences, the interest, the focus. And one of the things, for instance, the education tells a lot, because if people have a legal background, they'll be focused on legal stuff. If they have an engineering background, they'll be focusing on the technical stuff. If they're coming with a financial background, they're typically focusing on the finance, so on and so forth. We do what we're comfortable with. So whatever you're educated in, that's what you're comfortable with, and that's where your focus will be. So I dive into the people more than the country itself, if that makes sense.
That's really amazing, and allow me to applaud you on highlighting the difference of the culture between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, because we are in the same country, but we have different cultures, and people never realize that. So it is very interesting. Keld, why the value of trust currency will never go down in the UAE?
I don't think that, well, it's a great question again, Samar. Thank you for asking really good questions. I would say trust carries different timing in different parts of the world. Again, I'm generalizing. But if we look here in the US, there's a tendency that trust happens after the deal. The US is very deal focused. Again, I'm generalizing. But there's a tendency, you do the deal, and based on the deal, you create trust. A lot of cultures in the world are quite opposite. You create trust, and then you do the deal. Huge area of the Middle East are focused on that. You create the relationship, you create trust, and based on that, you do the deal, which actually personally I enjoy more than the deal and then trust. So I think that I would just say keep doing what you're doing. And what I mean by that is keep focusing on the relationship and the trust. And I think I have an important quote here, and that is, think about it this way. If we have a high level of trust in any interaction, our transaction cost will go down and our profit will increase. But on the other hand, if trust is low, transaction cost will increase and profit will decline. So back to what I said in our research, we can capitalize trust. So I think those organizations that keep focusing on trust is going to do absolutely okay.
My last question to you today is, what is the negotiation table that Keld Jensen would like to sit at?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I think there's a lot of negotiations tables I would love to sit at, and there's even some I wouldn't. There's some negotiations that are really difficult. And you raised a very important topic earlier, Samar, because you talked about the different directions in negotiation. That's so true. You have conflict negotiators, you have hostage negotiators, you have commercial negotiators. There's a lot of different directions. And I think there's a bit of confusion in the world right now, because I deeply respect hostage negotiators. I mean, they're doing an amazing job when there's a crisis. I'm certainly not a hostage negotiator. If somebody called me right now and says there's a hostage negotiation going on 2 blocks from here, could you come and help out? I would say, I can't. I have no idea what to do in a hostage negotiation. That's not my field.
Call Chris Voss.
Yeah, exactly. And on the other hand, if you have a hostage negotiator stepping into a commercial area, they have no idea what they're doing either. It's two very different types of negotiation. Can you learn something from both of them? Absolutely. But back to what I said earlier, why do we do commercial and to a certain degree political negotiations? Well, we do it to create and distribute value. In a hostage negotiation, you don't create and distribute value. So when we talk about directions in negotiation, we have positional negotiation and collaborative negotiation. And a hostage negotiation is very much a positional negotiation, because you have one that wins and one that loses. Both parties can't win because the criminal is not allowed to walk away with a good deal. So it's a very different set. And I'm sorry, again, it comes a long answer, but I'm not a big fan of negotiation being a theater where we use tactics and strategies and read body language. And, there's so many books out there, and how can we outmaneuver the counterpart? I don't believe in all of that at all. I believe that negotiation is a transparent, collaborative process where we're working together to create value for you and me. So I don't want to make $100 in your expense, and you should make $100 in my expense. We should work together to create $100. And that's possible, but it requires, back to what we talked about when we started, a change of a mindset on how we perceive negotiation. So back as I said, it's not a theater, it's a collaboration.
Keld, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you today with Culture Capsule. Time flew, and I hope that we can see more of you here in the UAE, and have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for our audience, and see you soon in another episode of Culture Capsule.